Yes.
How soon do you think it might be before we have totally driverless cars that even, let's say, a blind person could operate? Both, I know there's both technology involved and then a legal and regulatory structure as well.
Well, I'm not a very effective futurist, but it could be fairly soon. Now, whether fairly soon is 15 years or 25 years, I'm not sure what it is, but it's clear that this is going to really make a radical change. And you think about, you think about what this would do for people as they age. And there's always the assumption, there's a lot of people assume that as people get older, they're all going to be forced to move downtown because there they can get transit. Well, no. When people get to the point they can't drive anymore, they're going into the assisted living home, and they really, for the most part, couldn't care about all of that. The basic point, though, is that you think about people, disabled people, elderly people who, for whatever reason, can no longer drive. This is going to be an incredible improvement. But how long, I don't know.
It's already there, though. I mean, the technology...
Oh, yeah, the technology, no question.
It's already rolling out. The discussion is happening in state houses all across the country. Google has hired tons of lobbyists around the country to start going through this. Wendell, you attend more transportation conferences than I do, but the automated vehicle technology has been a growing topic of conversation in the transportation policy community because we're on the cusp of that reality. So I think regulation is going to take a while to catch up to the technology. That's what's going to be the 15 years is for all the policymakers to kind of get their heads.
Yeah, you think about what happened on this, and I don't know if you remember this, Leonard, but in the late 90s, I think it was, there was a real interest on the part of GM and the US DOT and so on in trying to automate highways. And so their whole idea was the idea of a convoy. Somehow you get these cars that are talking to one another along the freeway. Well, that was so primitive. It was important, of course. But now we've got a system with these automated cars. We don't have to do anything to the road. All we got to do is make sure these cars are equipped so they know where everyone else is. And frankly, it doesn't matter if 10 years from now we have 20% automation or 50% automation or whatever. The only point is, to the extent there is more automation, there's going to be more mobility. And by the way, accidents are going to be severely reduced. And by the way, just let me tell you one other thing you may not be aware of. A lot of people are very concerned about highway deaths in the United States, and for good reason. You realize that in, I think it was 1955, somewhere around that point, we were killing 50,000 people a year on our highways in this country. And we were driving a fraction of the distance we're driving today. Latest figures I've seen is under 35,000. Now, that shows you how much better we are at this point. But a great question. Did I see a hand way back there? Yes, sir.
Are you explaining that the better the transit, the better the local economy, or the better the local economy, the more they can afford transit?
Well, I'm not talking about transit with respect to that at all. I'm talking about, in terms of the connection, I'm talking about to the extent that people can get to more jobs in the metropolitan area, you're likely to have a better economy. Now, I'm not talking about comparing Wichita to Oklahoma City. I'm talking about comparing Wichita to Wichita. In other words, if in Wichita, and by the way, I'm confident that 100% of the people in Wichita can get to work in 30 minutes. Because so many of the big cities, it's been shown to be the case. But if you could, let's go to a place like Chicago, where things are not that good. Let's say that 40% of the jobs are available to the average person who lives in Chicago. If we can get that up to 50%, we're going to, according to the research, improve the economy. And that's why the basic point is, you've got to think about what is a metropolitan area. A metropolitan area is a labor market. And if it gets too big, it's not going to be nearly as effective. And that's why you've got to have transportation that serves it. And again, probably the best places, though they don't have the highest incomes yet, in the United States are really the metropolitan areas below 3 million people, where almost without exception you can get to 100% of the jobs within 30 minutes. Yes, sir, go ahead.
Would you say the most important part of the transit system would be to get people to work?
Well,
no.
From what I know about transit, I'm much more concerned about moving low-income people, and we don't do that as well as we should. I remember in Los Angeles, where the transit ridership is really not that bad. But when I was on the commission, and it still happens to this day, in the low-income sections of the city, the African-American and Hispanic sections of the city, people were often having to stand at a bus stop for 2 or 3 buses to go by and couldn't get on it. I was a suburban representative, and I tried to get service reallocated from the suburbs to where people needed it. And I think that's the first issue. I think that's the first role of transit. Now, if you talk about these very unusual places that will never be replicated anywhere else in the United States or anywhere else in the world, if they don't exist already, think of those 6 large cities I talked to you about. Manhattan. There's no way that Manhattan and New York could get along very well without its transit system. But we're not building Manhattans anymore, and we never will. There's no way that the Chicago Loop could get along without an incredible transit system. But we have to recognize the downtowns of those places are far different. Think about New York. South of 59th Street, 75% in Manhattan, which is Central Park. South of 59th Street, 75% of the workers get to work by transit. Incredible. On the other hand, you go to Portland, which everybody likes. Only 30% of downtown workers get to work on transit. The average for a major downtown area is more like 10 or 12%. So again, the biggest metropolitan areas, and again, these 6 cities, they're all over 40% in terms of that. So it's really, you got 2 markets, but you're not going to recreate the second market. The second market is historical. It's doing well. There's no question that jobs are inching up in Manhattan, but still the employment in Manhattan isn't back to 1955 levels. Do we have what? Yes, go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I was trying to give others a chance, but go ahead. Sure.
Des Moines is the 15th highest what in the world?
Gross domestic product per capita, which is a surrogate for income. And by 15th, I need to get back and actually count it. I think it's 15th. It's close to 15th. So
That's close enough. Thank you.
yeah, okay. And I don't know. You've got it there. I mean, just take a look at that chart and count from the top. I'm sorry.
All right.
Yes, go ahead.
So I've read some of the papers that have talked about the tremendous boost to job prospects and prosperity and just fun that mobility has. And for most people, the easiest, I think you're saying the easiest, the most immediate way to get mobility is a car.
Well, I'm not saying that. I'm saying whatever works. Now, at the moment, the car certainly appears to have an advantage. And the minute that transit has an alternative that's better than the car, I will be an advocate of transit. Again, my interest is not cars versus transit. My interest is economic growth, a better standard of living, and less poverty. And whatever gets us there, I'm in favor of.
So do you think it might be worthwhile to try to find ways to make it easier or more affordable for low-income people to afford cars?
Oh yeah, indeed. There are some private nonprofit approaches around the country. I can't remember the names of any of them, where they actually go in and try to help people finance cars and that kind of thing. The whole car sharing thing, which is happening in San Francisco and other places could help, though it's probably too expensive for low-income people. But yeah, we need to get these people cars. And there are some people, and I really find this an objectionable position, say, oh, well, you can't do that, it's going to worsen traffic congestion. But you mean you want these people to stay in poverty so that congestion is better? Come on, what kind of a person are you? The fact is, low-income people, take for example Hunters Point. Hunters Point is a low-income section of San Francisco that's about to be gentrified and soon won't be low-income anymore as a result. A lot of people without cars in Hunters Point. Now, if our employee who lives in Hunters Point, who's low income, works in the city of San Francisco, even if he's got a car, he's going to take transit. There's no great advantage to a car in San Francisco. They're not going to be able to pay for the parking, etc., etc., and they're going to get very nicely throughout the city on transit. On the other hand, if they get a job in Oakland or in Contra Costa County, they're going to have the car. So, not having the car means they can only work in San Francisco. Having the car means they can work anywhere in the metropolitan area. So, yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
On taxis, we've got Uber. This is a new system.
Yes.
Does that fit into this anyway? And is there any role for charitable transportation
Well, charitable transportation is already playing a big role, but it's oftentimes not terribly well coordinated with the public systems. In some cases, better than others. But no, Uber and Lyft are really great improvements. One has to recognize, though, that they are not. None of these things is perfect. I mean, it's like go back to cars. You know, if you need to get around New York, the worst possible alternative is a car. If you need to get around the New York suburbs, the best possible alternative is a car. The basic problem, I was looking at this because of some work I was doing in South Florida recently, and I was looking at, well, you know, what's it going to cost me if I want to go from Miami to West Palm Beach? And it appeared that it was going to be, you know, competitive with a taxi cab, but not many of us, including me, would ever think of going from Miami to West Palm Beach in a taxi cab because of the expense. On the other hand, I've got good friends in Washington, D.C. and other urban areas, urban centers, where this makes all the sense in the world. If you're in a place like Washington where you've got a good transit system, and by good, I mean this is a transit, not good is the wrong thing, effective is the better thing. I mean, you can get throughout the city of Washington pretty well on transit. But there are places you can't get. And so Uber or Lyft is going to make it possible for you to make those trips. They're going to be more expensive, but you can do it. You can see it in the city of Paris, where Mayor, can't even remember his name now, he's now out of office. The mayor that was in office in 2010 basically announced his plan, though I have not followed up to see how it's doing, basically tried to bring car sharing services into the city of Paris. Now, the city of Paris covers 40 square miles. That's nothing. As I recall, what's the area of the city of Wichita? 150 or so square miles? I mean, Paris has 2 million people in 40 square miles. I think the most beautiful city in the world. It has a subway system, the metro, that you can reach in a walk of 300 yards from any place in the city. It's incredible. Yet, all of the lines go like this. So if you live here and you work there, you got to do this. And so the mayor is basically saying we need car sharing as well. And so that shows that there can be a market there. But those trips are going to be more expensive. We may be close to, yes sir.
You've obviously looked at Wichita because you have statistics.
Yeah, not that carefully. I'd like to have looked at it better.
But of all the places in the world and your knowledge of transportation, and we fit fairly well, but what should we do to make it better? The
Key in Wichita, where, for example, 99.6, well, no, only 0.4% is of work trip travel is by transit. The key is if you've got problems, and I've not looked at it closely enough to see the extent to which you have traffic congestion problems, but you really need to, I'll give you a formula, not an answer. The question comes down to minimizing the the time that people have to spend in travel of all sorts. The question comes down to how do you minimize that at the lowest cost? So you could say, for example, put together a metric that says, what is the cost per hour of reduced travel time of various alternatives, and make your selection from this. It is not transit versus highways, transit versus cars. We need to get away from that kind of thinking and recognize, one, mobility is what makes the city work, and two, we need to get more of it at the lowest possible cost, and I couldn't care less how we do that. So anyway, I think, are we about finished here? All right. Oh, go ahead, I'm sorry. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Are we beyond raising rates and cutting service in Wichita?
I don't know the situation that well. I would hold that comment or that question for Mr.
The next
Slade.
question. Are you going to be on the job for the next 5 years during the period of the sales tax?
What's that again?
You're going to be on the job in Wichita doing this transit plan during the sales tax.
Me?
Yeah, you're going to be on the job.
No, I'm sorry. I'm from St. Louis. So
He's
I'm
outside.
sorry about that.
No, but are they going to use you for the next 5
I
years?
have no idea.
And Wendell's not affiliated with the city or speaking in their behalf. Okay, I think.
Are you going to hire me, Steve?
I got a job, buddy.
Okay, great.
I think that question's for the next speaker.
Well, here's what happened. I got a weed problem on the north end of Cheney Lake, and I have been hiring weed diggers. And they are the bottom of the bottom. And the reason they're the bottom of the bottom is a lot of reasons. But getting a job to their household, to where they can go to work, is a big reason why they are not doing anything. They are existing. People like me that will hire them to go dig weeds on the north side of Cheney Lake. That is the problem. The transit problem is it.
Yeah,
They have a way of getting a job that they wouldn't have to spend $6 or $8 or whatever their pay is. You know, they look at how they get there and.
Yeah, no, the situation of low-income people with respect to mobility in metropolitan areas is a real big problem.
It is.
And I largely argue, and this was my position on the LACTC, that we need to put our subsidies into moving people that cannot take care of their own needs. And I do think that there has been too much of an emphasis in transit on attempting to get people out of cars who they will never get out of cars, and instead of improving mobility for low-income people. And as a matter of fact, in Los Angeles, 10 years after I left the commission, there was a major suit brought against my old organization, which had then merged with the bus operator and the train operator. And the courts basically ruled, you are taking service away from low-income people, stop building rail. And basically held them up for 3 years. They had to redo everything and all that kind of thing. So that is a problem. And I can tell you, when you think about Los Angeles, a county that's added probably 2 million people since '85, when our peak ridership occurred, our transit system in 1985 carried 497 million people on buses. In 2012, the buses and rail for the same system carried 461 million, 36 million less. I can tell you what's happened. Yeah, there have been a lot of people leave their car and go in transit, and they knocked off low-income people, is what it appears has occurred anyway. We have another, yes? Yep.
Yeah, you talked about affordable housing
Yeah.
and regulations, how the two work together where you increase the
Right.
rates and everything. And yet the poor need the cars. I don't see, we're building apartments downtown. It goes back to your slide where you have the path of the people.
Yeah, right.
And right now, we got all the planners building apartments and pouring money into downtown to build apartments and in hopes that everybody's just going to rush downtown. Do you see any sense in planning to try to get people to relocate?
Well, I see a sense in allowing the market to respond to people's preferences. And there is no doubt that there is some increased preference for living downtown among some groups. How big it is, I don't know. And you can't know if you're subsidizing it. So I think, again, if people want to live downtown, by all means, let them. Let the market provide it. And I don't know. I mean, some say, and I can't give even the slightest hint of a comment on Wichita. I can tell you, however, you go to Portland, you know, everybody loves Portland. And by the way, I grew up there, so it's okay for me to criticize you. Having been born in LA and came back later. In Portland, my last recollection I have is that they have issued approximately $2.2 billion in bonds to support things like the streetcar, the Pearl District, that kind of thing. The Albina District, which is the historic African American district of Portland, the African Americans are so upset about what's happening with gentrification up there that they basically blocked the addition of a Trader Joe's market there. People, the black community in Portland is being decimated by gentrification as they now move to the suburbs. Now, I have no problem if the market comes in, if the people of Portland decide they all want to live on North Interstate Avenue, so the developers go and buy up property and build buildings without any government support whatsoever, that's called the market, and things will work out in the long run. But what's happening in Portland is subsidizing the gentrification of poor neighborhoods and driving low-income people out. And let me tell you, if you're thinking about transit, I mean, think about, I don't know anything about the transit system in Wichita, but I'll bet if you live 1 mile from downtown, the transit system is a lot better for you than if you live 10 miles from downtown. And let me tell you about North Interstate Avenue. Great transit service. What happens when an African American family is forced to move from inner city Albina out to Gresham or out to Hillsborough or Aloha or any of those places? All of a sudden, they can't get where they need to go on transit. They need a car all of a sudden. And this is the a real problem with respect to that kind of planning. And I have no idea whether it's happening here. I suspect it's not happening anything like what in Portland.
Thank you, Wendell.
Okay, thank you.